Well, good morning. I must not have been paying attention when I said that. Good morning. Okay, good to see you guys. Welcome to Life Spring Church. For all you young children over in the other building watching this, I'm giving you a shout out right now. Good morning. So that all the kids are over there watching. They worship with, where'd you go? Here, is this your water? Yes, it is. So you want it? I'm going to talk about drinking water, so you might want to take it. There you go. So the kids are over there. If you got children, you want to take them over to Kids Spring, they're over there, but they were watching the worship. They do the worship over there in the downstairs through the video and all that stuff. But anyway, good to have you here. You feeling good today? Oh, come on. You feeling good today? Yeah. Even if you got a hurt knee back there and you're like propped up, I'm liking that. She's taking it. Look, and her sister is just so loving. She sits with her while she's sitting and can't stand. I like that. So, but it's good to have you here. We're in a message series now where we're talking about some things about what might be missing in our life or what might be we might be struggling with. I mean, most messages are about what we're struggling with, but the premise of what we're working on now is based off of the heat and how hot it is in our environment today and how it's sucking the life out of many of us. How many of you have been out in the middle of the day in the sun for at least an hour? Has anybody done that recently? It ain't something you survived it. That's what we do. We're not many of us is making it in that. I tell you what, it is hot out there, isn't it? Like heat index is like, I don't know how they calculate that, but it's like 100 and something. It's like 97 degrees, and the heat index is 102, 103, 104. Now, if you work at the Walmart distribution center, it's like that all the time, isn't it, Rich? It's like a heat index of 100 plus in there all the time. So he's like, I don't know what you're complaining about. So anyway. The premise of what we're working on, of a message this time, speaks to where Jesus spoke to his disciples in the book of John, or that's recorded in the book of John, where he says this comment to them. He says, and I'm just going to read this to you. On the last and the greatest day of the festival, Jesus stood up and he said in a loud voice, "Let anyone who is thirsty come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as Scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow from within them." What Jesus is saying in this passage, especially in this first sentence of this passage, if I can sum it up, is the drought is over. The drought is over. I know that it's out there. It seems like it's no end in sight, but he said the drought is over. I've got what you need. He makes this statement that anyone who is thirsty, come to me and drink. It means if you're thirsty, if you're just your mouth is parched and dry from the humidity or the heat or whatever it is where the moisture of your body is being taken out of you. He says, I got the answer. I can quench your thirst. He says, all you got to do is come to me. He says, I can help. I have what you need, and I have what you've been searching for. I have what it takes to quench your thirst. Now, I really don't think he's talking about thirst here. He's using it as is that an analogy? Is that what that is? Or some type of thing that you can relate to? Because they're in a very arid and dry area where he's telling this to them at. It's very hot, more hot than it is here. But he's using this analogy because they've all been thirsty before. How many of you have ever been thirsty before? And when you're thirsty and somebody talks about being thirsty, it makes it worse, doesn't it? How many of you have been thirsty on a hot day and drink a hot cup of coffee just because you're thirsty? Now, see, y'all, I don't know what's going on with you guys now. I just don't know. My point is, Jesus is talking more than about thirst. I think what he's talking about is the thirst of the soul. He's saying, I can help you. The drought is over. All you have to do is come to me and drink. And that means to me it's something different. When you drink, you take water in, don't you? Don't you, when you drink, you sort of, just the sound of that sounds good, doesn't it? And all of you starting your mouth's watering and everything, He's like, those of you who believe in me, come let me be a part of you. Come, he says, if you're thirsty, come to me and take me in. Let me be a part of your life. Let me be more than just a surrounding around you. You understand the concept of humidity? Does everybody understand humidity? What is humidity? Heat is heat. Humidity is something else. What's humidity a measure of?
Very irritating temperature.
Say it again.
Very irritating temperature.
Very irritating temperature. Humidity isn't about temperature. It's about what? Moisture in the air. So the more moisture in the air, what does that mean? It's higher humidity. When you add higher humidity with higher temperatures, what happens? What do? You sweat. Where does the sweat come from? From inside of your body to the outside. Is that correct? But how about when you have a cup of ice water and you set it down in a very humid area, what happens then? That condensates. Where does that water come from? Does that mean that water is leaking out of that vessel? It's coming from the atmosphere. So my question is, why on a hot, humid day when there's plenty of moisture in the air do we dehydrate? If there's that much moisture, you can set a cup down that has ice in it, and the air will put water on it. That's water that you could drink. It's not salt water. It's not anything else. It's water out of the air that it condensates. How come we struggle with thirst? But it's all around you. It's a measure of humidity. And if you're not measuring a gas, you're actually measuring water. Water vapor, so you're measuring water. My point is, you're walking around in water, but yet you're thirsting. Correct? The more humidity there is, the more there is. Matter of fact, how many of you ever run your air conditioner in your car, pull up to a parking spot? Now, I wouldn't understand this because my air conditioner is broke right now. But if you drive in an air conditioner, pull up in the parking lot, leave your car running, what starts coming out from underneath your car? How many of you have ever thought something was wrong with my car when you see that? Because you see how much water? Absolutely. Where does that water come from? Condensation. It's the water in the air. Do you know how hot an engine is? And yet that water is just rolling off of that. Jesus is saying, listen, it's not just to be able to come to me. It's not to be able to, you're thirsty and you have this thirst and you want it quenched. You got to take me in. You got to take that's on the outside of you and put it on the inside. That will quench your thirst. And he says, not only that, for those of you who believe in me, those of you who believe not only who I am, that I'm God's one and only Son, not only that I am God's Son, believe what I do and what I say and what I teach is what my Father would say and teach to you. That I'm a representative, that Jesus is saying, if you just believe that I'm who I say I am, that I'm God's Son, and when I speak to you, I speak on behalf of my Father. And therefore, when I teach you and I tell you things that you could, should, would, might do that would help your life, then when I do that, I'm doing it as the Father would do it to you. And when you believe those things and you take that in and you allow it to go inside of you, not just walk around in this world with it, but take it inside of you, it will not only quench your thirst, but you will be like a river of living water. And you will quench the thirst of the world. In other words, what I put in you is one thing. What I put in you will quench your thirst, but when you believe all that I teach you, all that I say to you, and believe all that I am, it changes from just being the water for you, but you become the water for the world. You become my avenue to water the world to quench their thirst if you just believe. What is inside of you will increase. What is inside of you will multiply, and others will be able to come to you. Have you noticed? I've noticed recently when I go driving down the roads that there's cotton. Cotton is in this prime growing season right now. This is the time. Some cotton fields are irrigated. They have a single pivot irrigation system hooked to a well that goes around and waters every so often. That cotton that I see that is irrigated is this high right about now. This high, very green, has bulbs on it, or the bulbs have opened up into white flowers, which will represent where the cotton will be in the future. But yet there's other fields right now that are not irrigated. The same cotton seed is only at this time. They were planted at the same time, but it's only this high. It's not as full. It's not as green. It doesn't have as many bulbs. In fact, some of them aren't even ready to bulb yet, aren't ready to bloom. And the reason is because the water is being sucked out of them from the environment, but not replaced. Whereas the other cotton plants, the water is being pulled out of them, but it's being replenished by irrigation. See, and that's what happens in our Christian life. See, depending on how long we go, if we don't replenish the water supply, not just around us, but inside of us, we end up to be like these cotton plants. We're not very fruitful. We look weak and pitiful. We are just hanging on by a thread. Couple more days of environment like this, if they don't just rain or something happen, we will dry up and we'll die. These, on the other hand, doesn't matter what the environment is. Because we're not based on what the environment does, we're based on being watered by this irrigation system. This irrigation system that has a pipe that goes down, a well that goes all the way down to the main body of water underground. An underground river of water, living water. That when it comes out and it produces. This crop over here, if it does make it to harvest time, will not even produce anything near what this one will. But yet they started from the same beginnings in the same place. Jesus says, if you believe in me, and you believe who I am and what I say, and you believe my teachings as Scripture has said, you will be that living water. And it will flow from you to others. One of the things we talked about recently is that thirst is one of the first symptoms of dehydration, of being dehydrated. Thirst. It's a signal to you something's not right. For many of us in our life, we're not just thirsting for water, we're thirsting for other things that aren't right in our life. We're thirsting for hope. We're thirsting for direction. We're thirsting for friendships. We're thirsting for companionships. We're thirsting to understand more about what my purpose is in life. We're thirsting. And we're drying up like this, and we're in a world full of single pivot irrigation systems that won't turn on, called the church. They sit there tapped into the living water, but they don't turn on and they don't run. You know what happens to fields that have a broken down irrigation system and they don't run the irrigation system? It looks the same as that one that has no irrigation system and didn't get water, because neither one puts out water. And so the world looks at us and coming to church every week and looks at us and looks for us to have hope and looks for us to quench their thirst, looks for us to give them inspiration, direction, and hope because of what our beliefs are in Jesus Christ until they can get that belief in Jesus Christ. And yet they're thirsting because we aren't putting out water. We, in fact, are dehydrated. You see, some of us are like this cup. This cup can hold water and we can drink from it and quench our own thirst. But some of us are too busy. We're walking around life with our cup in our hand, and we're just walking around and we're doing things because I have to go do the work. I have to work. I got kids. I've got other things I got to do. I got homework. I got all these life things. You don't understand the bills that are on me. You don't understand the struggles that are going on in my family. You don't understand how unbalanced my life is, and we're walking around like this. And the world sees us as a cup that should be full of water, and they see this. And we don't. We don't see it. We've been walking around this cup for so long. We've been going to church for so long. We've been doing this. Well, I went to church last year. I mean, my goodness, how often do you need to go for church? I went to a small group one time in my life. I remember when I was in the 4th grade, I went to one. They called it Sunday school class. But I don't have time to do that stuff now. I can't get there. I'm too busy. And some of you, God forgive us, are too good. You ain't talking about me, preacher. I'm there every Sunday. I might not do some of that other stuff, but I come into that worship service and I stand there. I stand there when they sing. Now, I don't sing, but I stand there. I stand up and sit down. I don't put my offering in the plate, but I come and I stand up and I do those things. I took communion before. Way back in the day, I was baptized when I was a little fella, or maybe not long ago, but listen, you ain't talking about me. You got to be talking about somebody like Mr. Thomas or somebody like Ricky, somebody else in here. You ain't talking about me because I'm too good. Look, I got the cup. But you're empty. It's been years since you've been watered. You're like a broken irrigation system. And you look good on the outside. And things come to you expecting water, and you can't give them water because you ain't even got any for yourself. So you start to show, you want to know if you're one of these type of people? Look to see if you're confused in your life about what's going on. See, one of the other symptoms of not just being thirsty for stuff is being confused about what to do or which direction to go. Or maybe you're emotionless. You have no emotions. Or maybe you're super or hyper emotional. Everything is just one extreme to the other. You're just way off, because those are also symptoms of dehydration. Symptoms that your body gives off that shows you need something and you need to get some drink soon. Maybe you're irritable or angry or frustrated. Get frustrated real easy. You ever notice how people who are thirsty, who are dehydrated, they just get mean? Maybe that's you. And if you ain't sure, ask somebody sitting beside you, because if they're honest, they'll tell you the truth. Or just get tired, lethargic, and just don't care anymore. Are you that kind of vessel? Are you that kind of cup? I don't know. See, there's other examples about why people thirst. There's other examples about how people are missing the love of Jesus in this world. You see, after his life on earth as a human being, God's one and only Son, after he worked with this small group of people that expanded into a larger group of people, that some on the fringes sort of didn't get it, but they just would follow him anyway. Maybe to take a day off from work. I heard Jesus is coming in town. I'm going to take a day off work, go check it out, like the fair. I don't know if I'm going to ride a ride, but I'll go see the fair. At least I'll buy some cotton candy. I don't know. But the whole point is that Jesus taught for these years. 3 years he taught these disciples, these close followers. And then he was still put to death, killed. Killed on one of their highest religious holidays, on Passover. Put in a tomb. They go back to the tomb and he's not there. They think he's stolen. They come back and they think he's stolen. The women come and they talk to the guys and say, hey, he ain't there. And they go down there and he ain't there. And they think he's stolen. And they go back. Peter and John go back. He's stolen. They took him. One of the women stayed there, and the angel tells her, says, he's not dead, he's arisen. In fact, one of them has a conversation with the risen Jesus, the alive Jesus, in a different form, not in human form, but in a resurrected form. And he begins to converse with her. She goes back and tells them, they don't believe it. 2 of them actually go back home. They headed back home, and on their way home, Jesus appears to them in this resurrected form that they can't tell who he is. Even though they just was with him the other night eating, they don't recognize him. And so they're walking, and Jesus begins to open up the scriptures and talks to them. And when they break the bread, they realize, oh, that's Jesus, and he disappears. He shows up behind an upper room, and behind locked doors in an upper room. He keeps appearing to them in many ways. But let me tell you this, it's not about just what he said that's important about those times that he appeared after he was resurrected. It's the ways that he did it, the places that he did it, the times that he did it. There's one time he shows up behind locked doors. There's another time one guy wasn't there, and he talked about and said, well, if he's there, if that Jesus is really alive, I won't believe it till I put my fingers in the holes where they nailed him to the cross. Sure enough, Jesus shows up one day and says, peace be with you, behind locked doors. Thomas was there, that guy that doubted. And Jesus said, yo, man, put your finger right there. He just showed up. Was it really about the words that he said, or about, listen, doors don't kick me out. You can be walking away from me like those 2 guys were walking away that followed me for years, 2 disciples that followed me for years, and they're walking away. I'll show up. Don't think there's anywhere you can go that I can't get to you. That's what Jesus is saying in some of the actions. And so one day, Peter and John and a lot of others had left from Jerusalem, and they headed back and went back up north, about 2.5-hour car ride up to the Sea of Galilee, back where their hometown was, back near Nazareth where Jesus' mama was from. And they were back there at that Sea of Galilee where they used to be fishermen at. But they left all that 3 years earlier, 3.5 years earlier to follow Jesus, so they're back up there. And listen to what it says in John chapter 21. It says, afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. Not just at the temple, not just where church is, not just where the temple and the Ark of the Covenant and all of these things are. No, he showed up to them back in their hometown. You can't go far enough to get from him. He shows up there, and it happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, he's also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana of Galilee. See, that's his hometown. The sons of Zebedee, which there's 2 of them that we know of, James and John. John's the one writing this. And 2 other disciples. They don't even say their names. 7 of the 12 are up there together. Peter says this phrase, says, I'm going out to fish. Simon Peter told them, and they said, well, we'll go with you. So they went out, got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. This guy named Tusani said this one time. He said, the journey towards success is more like a traveler lost in the desert, desperate to find an oasis, desperate to quench his thirst. But it's not about how grave the thirst. It's not about how bad he wants the water. It's how long he chooses to walk thirsty. See, in my opinion, Peter was choosing to walk thirsty. You might ask, well, what's the big deal? He's just up at Galilee. He's just going fishing. Yeah, most people just go fishing during the daytime. Most people just go fishing in their rod and reel. Peter is not that type of fisherman. Peter's going back to who he used to be. He'd walked with Jesus. He'd talked with Jesus. He'd been with the resurrected Jesus. And he still is going back to who he used to be. I'm going to fish at night. That's what commercial fishermen do. That's what we do. I'm back home. I come back into that environment that seems like I'm away from Jesus. He can't get here, and I end up doing the things I used to do. And so he goes back fishing. And you know what the sad thing is? Listen to this statement. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter said. It'd be great if it was just him, but you know what? This. We'll go with you. He's got 6 others following him. How many people are following you when you go to the places that isn't where Jesus called you to be? How many people are following the church to the places it shouldn't be going and behaving in the ways it shouldn't behaving? And saying the things it shouldn't say, or in truth, not saying what they should say. Peter was choosing to walk thirsty. It's like he's saying, I'm dying of thirst, yet I choose to be surrounded by salt water that I can't drink. See, I think the same is true for church. There's some people that come to church once and said, it didn't work out for me. I didn't like it. And so they don't come back. They go back to who they used to be before Jesus, before their encounter with Jesus, before they knew anything. They go back to what their old self was, what they were comfortable with. They say things like, it's not important to be in a small group. It's not important to have accountability or have somebody to talk to and talk about how this scripture relates to. It's just, all I have to do is go to church. I don't have to be involved in a small group. I don't have to be involved in volunteering. I don't have to be involved in serving. I just have to go to church. That's all I do. Show up, get my star on the board, I'm good. I don't need help from other people. I'll make it on my own. See, here's the thing. There's always tension. There's always tension. People say, you don't understand how tough it is, preacher, there's so much tension to do this and do that. There's always tension, people. There's always tension to go back to who you used to be. There's always tension to think that this Jesus isn't real, that he's not who he says. There's always tension to go back and say, well, that water has quenched my thirst, but I don't know if it can quench my thirst now because I've been working pretty hard. Pretty long, and I'm pretty thirsty. I'm pretty dehydrated. So there's tension to go back to who we used to be, to where we stop trying. People get the tension where I invited somebody to church and it didn't work, so I'm going to stop. I went to a small group, but I didn't like what they were talking about. I went to that worship service, but I didn't like the music, or I didn't like what the preacher said. I'm not going back again. And so they keep doing that. They go back to who they used to be. What that's like is the people who have had a drink of water before. And they had this drink of water and it's quenched them. But yet things aren't going like what they want, so they just go back and they feel it. And they don't realize there's a hole in them. And that hole is allowing everything that they hear, everything that they see, everything that they witness about Jesus Christ and how He can change the world and quench their thirst and quench the world's, and it runs right through them and has no effect. And so they go back to who they used to be, to an empty vessel. And they're satisfied with that. No, they're not like the other person running around, oh, I got plenty to do and everything. Oh, no, they tried it. But it wasn't having an effect. And see, Jesus says, come to me, any of you who are thirsty. And He says, I got what you need. Don't worry about that part about not being perfect or whatever. I'll take you just like you are, because you know what? I got the tape that you need. And I'll put that tape on you. And you try it again. And guess what? People will drink from you and you'll thirst no more. Peter wasn't doing that. Peter gave up on all that. He went back to fishing. He couldn't trust Him again. Or at least he wasn't at that point. Scriptures go on in verse 4. It says, early in the morning. So they fished all night long. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore. So He shows up to him. He's on the shore. But the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus, because He's about 100 yards away. Pretty good distance. He called out them, friends, have you any fish? And I'm thinking, if you're about 100 yards away and you're on the water, you got, hey, you got any fish? They don't know who it is. They ain't got their glasses on. I don't know. They don't know who it is. No, they answered. He said, throw your nets out on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some. And when they did this, they were unable to haul the net in because of a large number of fish. See, remember I told you there's always tension? There's always tension. There's always tension to do nothing. See, when he yelled out there, hey, did you catch any fish? No. Throw your net out on the other side. I ain't doing it. I fished all night. I done this once. Who are you to tell me how to do? I don't even know who you are. You want me to throw this net? Do you know how hot and tight? And there's 6 of you, 7 of you out there. No, I'm not doing anything. I quit. 12, 14 hours is enough of me trying this. See, there's tension to do nothing. There's tension to ignore what you hear from the pulpit. There's a tension to ignore what you hear through the Scriptures. There's tension to ignore what God speaks to you through small groups, through the world situations, through life experiences. There's tension to ignore what God speaks through the traditions of the church. There's tension to ignore what God says to you in your prayer life. There's tension to ignore all that. There's tension to remain in our failures. I fished all night long. I failed. There's tension to stay right there in your failure and say, I'm not doing it anymore. You can't help me. I don't know you. There's tension to waller in our failures, to waller or wallow in our hopelessness, in our overwhelming things going on in our life that it's robbed us of the ability to think about the possibilities of what could be. Should I throw the net one more time? We already made up our mind to quit. Why would we throw it in again? We don't know that guy. I don't know, man. Maybe there's something we ought to try it one more time. You know how there's stories in the Bible, you get confused with other stories in the Bible. You ever done that before? It's like, this fishing story sounds familiar to me. Does it sound familiar to you? See, the reason is because it is familiar. Because years earlier, before Peter was the disciple Peter, before he was called Peter, he was just called Simon. See, that was his name, was Simon. Jesus is the one that named him Peter. Jesus is the one that changed who he was. Not only changed who he was, he said, I'm going to change your identity. You ain't going to be called Simon anymore. You're going to be called Simon Peter because you're different. I want to make sure he knew the name change was there. Even before the heart change happened, because they were out there fishing one day. They had fished all night. It was Peter and some others. They were fishing all night. Peter, his brother Andrew, James and John, who were the sons of Zebedee, who are here on this trip, and they were fishing. And they had fished all night long, didn't catch squat diddly. They're on the shore washing out their nets. Jesus has got his back to them, and he's preaching to this seashore of people. He's just preaching to them, and he just sort of backs up and says, let me get in your boat there, man. Push away from the show, because you know how people get up on you because they want to hear, so they keep moving. Well, you can't come out in the water, so he pushes out 20, 30 yards in the water in that boat. Well, they ain't going to wait out there, so he starts preaching and teaching them there. And then he tells Peter, he said, put out in the deep water. Matter of fact, listen to what he says. This is in Luke. Simon answered. See, his name ain't Peter. Simon answered, Master. Now, he understands he's a man of authority. He's overheard him teaching. He's overheard what he said to these people on that seashore. Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught a thing. I'm trying to think how I would say it. Master, I try to sound tired. You know what I'm saying? Master, we've worked. There was a group with him, remember? We've worked hard all night and haven't caught a thing. But because you say so, I'll let down the nets. And he lets down the nets. And Peter is by himself because where's the rest of them? They're on the shore washing off their nets. He starts to pull in the fish. He can't even pull it in. He motions them back out. They get all excited, paddle their boats out or sail their boats out there, get out there. They start hauling in. It's about to tear the nets, to break nets, but it doesn't. And they have this huge volume of fish. Sound familiar, doesn't it? Now listen to this. See, this is, remember what I told you? It's not, when Jesus shows up, it's not just what he says, it's when he shows up, what time, what circumstance, what location. It means something. Said when Simon Peter, and this is back in Luke's account of the first time it happened, before he was a disciple. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' feet and said, Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man. For he and his companions were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who was on this other fishing trip of the resurrection. Jesus showed up. Simon's pardon. Then Jesus said to Simon, Don't be afraid. From now on you'll fish for people. He tells him, I am a sinful man. Now let me tell you, at this point we don't know what Peter has done in his life. We don't know what Simon did. We don't know what sin was in his life, but I can tell you one thing I do know because it's recorded in Scripture. That son of a gun, Simon Peter, denied Jesus 3 times. Now, he doggone did that. Now, I don't know what stuff you've done in your life that you consider such a big sin that you can't get over, that you think God or Jesus can't forgive you for. I don't know what it is, but Simon Peter denied him 3 times, on top of all the other stuff that he did. On all of that, he is in bad shape. This second time they're fishing. And this guy on shore says the same words. Throw it out on the right-hand side of the boat. You don't think those guys are thinking back to 3 years earlier? This sounds familiar. Weren't we about here one time before? And they start to pull in the nets, right? And they get more fish, right? Now this time it ain't just Peter that pulled it in and they all come and help. They all are a part of it. Right? Let's fast forward back to when this resurrected Jesus told him to put in. See, before Peter when he fell, he's like, man, I'm a sinful man. Get away from me. Yeah, no, I can't be around you. I'm too bad. Now this is the Peter that's been around him 3 years, who screwed up as much as you can mess up anywhere, who denied him 3 times after saying, I'll die for you. Yeah, man, before the rooster crows 3 times, you'll deny me. One time Peter even got told by Jesus, get behind me, Satan, because you ain't got the ways of God. You're not thinking like right. You're not thinking like me. You're not thinking like God. You're not behaving like one of my followers. That's got to be Satan in you. That Peter is on the boat this day, and they pull in the nets. He still hadn't put it together. But the guy writing this, John, the beloved one, he got it. Listen to what it says in verse 7 of John 21. Then the disciple who Jesus loved, the one that was sitting beside him at the Passover meal, the one that was in the Garden of Gethsemane praying with Peter when they fell asleep, the one who was fishing, that's the son of Zebedee, the one of Peter, James, and John, one of the 3 inner closest people to Jesus. When the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. What did Simon do? Oh no, not me. I've rejected him 3 times. I can't. No, you don't know what I've done. I'm out here fishing in the dark. I shouldn't have done that. No, I just got to hide from him. What's he going to do? As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped in the water. And then the other disciples followed in the boat, towing the full net of fish, for they were not far from the shore, about 100 yards. You understand? This guy who before was like, I can't be around you. This guy even knows I'm a screw up. Peter knows I'm messed up. I messed up. I denied you worse than anybody else. But he don't run from Jesus. He jumps in the water and starts swimming 100 yards with his clothes on. Because he's thirsty. And he's tired of fishing to quench that thirst. He's tired of searching. He knows there's only one that can quench that thirst. And by the way, when he headed into shore, guess what the other 6 guys did? They followed. They followed him away, and they followed him back to Jesus. Who's following you? What's covering you up that you can't get this? That you're like Peter the first time. You're like Peter the first time. I'm a sinful man. Jesus trying to pour water on him. I'm a sinful man. And Peter's like, I don't understand why I wanted to go in. And you got this covering on you of your past. You got the covering on of what you did in the past that's drug you away. You yielded to the tension to go back to who you used to be. Before you drank from the water, before you knew. And he's still trying to pour it on you and it's just running off. But Peter, that's the way he got it the first time. I can't get it. I'll get away. But Peter says, I ain't doing that no more. I know you. I know who you are. And he rips off that cover and he throws it down. He says, I'm not going to let that stop me anymore. And Jesus he gets to shore and Jesus says, here you go, son. Yeah, you're right. You're going to be fisher of men. You're not just going to be fisher of fish. You're going to be fisher of men. People are going to come to you. I'm going to build the church on you. And people are going to drink. You're going to share it with others. And we're going to do some business now. We're going to change this world. So as the band's coming forward, here's my question to you. What's holding you back? What's holding you back? What's the tension that is so great in you that it's pulled you away? Or the tension that's so great that I'm too good, I'm already full, and you don't realize you're empty. Or maybe you don't realize that just because you're in the church, you might have holes in you, need them plugged up that only Jesus can plug. Or maybe you got that barrier over you of some failure or some struggle. And Jesus has been pouring water on you and it's just been running off of you and running straight into the sewer. It's about time we Get real. And start not just coming to church to hear, but coming to church to receive. See, this person, I thought about this, and this person who thinks they're full of water, they'll never get any water because they think they're full. It's all about somebody else, but they're empty. And I would say this, even if you've got this much in you, if you're not overflowing, then you're not where you need to be. It's not about getting a drop of water to cool your tongue. It's about getting the living water that fills you to overflowing so that you're filled and you're quenched and others are. And it only takes a leap to jump out of the boat when you recognize that's Jesus. It only takes a leap of faith to invite somebody again. It only takes a leap of faith to try a small group again. It only takes a leap to jump out of the boat and say, maybe I'll meet Jesus in this small group. Maybe that's Him. Maybe I can go there. Maybe the fellowship is what I'm needing. Or you stay on the boat. And have the shape of a living vessel, but the hollowness that leads to death and destruction. There's tension every time you have a choice to move forward, to stay where I am and do nothing, or to go back who I used to be. For me, I'm drinking. And I'm sure. Have a drink. We ain't afraid. We ain't afraid about the cooties. But we ain't going to walk in a world anymore that's got water all around us. And thirst. We choose to thirst no more. Amen.